Hello everyone, yes, I'm Heather Sebire and I'm a curator at Stonehenge and Avebury for English Heritage. But before I start, I would also just like to say what a fantastic privilege it's been to be part of the scientific committee for the Paysage de Megalith. And I must congratulate everyone involved so far. The archaeologists led by Christine Bugeaud and Serge Cassan and others, Luc Lepore is here, but also the administrators and all the local and national officials and tourists, everybody, mayors, everybody who's supported it. It's a very well-deserved project and I wish you all the luck for getting it to the end. Thank you. So anyway, back to Stonehenge. So as many of you will know, the stone circle at Stonehenge has been standing for around 4,500 years, and despite being very exposed, it has survived remarkably well. There isn't time to do a whole history of the monument here, but in terms of the stones, the huge uprights are sarsen, a type of hard sandstone, and the smaller stones are known as blue stones. That's an antiquarian term, of course, and are mostly dolerites and rhyolites. And despite being of strong and dense material, there are signs of natural weathering, but the stones have also suffered from human activity in recent centuries, particularly in the late 19th century, when visitors regularly chipped off pieces of stone to take home as souvenirs. But also, we're all being affected now by climate change, and that's having an impact on the site as well. One of the effects is that we're in the UK, I think you are here too, experiencing wetter winters and more intense downpours of rain throughout the year. And this will increase the speed at which the stones themselves are weathering. And we also know that the stones have many features on them which need protecting, such as carvings from the Bronze Age to historic graffiti, what we call historic graffiti, like the great architect Sir Christopher Wren. Oh, sorry, I need to go on one. Sorry. Who built St. Paul's Cathedral in London. He lived locally and came and carved his name on the stones when he was quite young. The lintels and their construction are one of the most amazing parts of the stone circle at Stonehenge, and one of the things that makes it unique in the prehistoric world. They are fixed to the standing stones with the equivalent of mortise and tenon joints and toggled together horizontally as well. The iconic trilithons, the Greek word for three stones, two uprights and a capstone, have become the symbol of Stonehenge. And of the five in the Great Horseshoe, only two on the east side are standing intact, and two others only have one stone standing and one on the west side, which was resurrected in 1958. There's a stylized drawing here of how it fits together. The lintels and how they were erected have fascinated people for centuries. Here is a 14th century manuscript from the British Library of Merlin the magician as a giant, or a giant helping Merlin, moving the Sarsens into place. The sculptor Henry Moore produced his Stonehenge suite in 1973, which is a series of lithographs based on sketches he made during very many early morning visits to Stonehenge. And he seems to have been interested in the natural forms, but also the mightiness of the rocks themselves. And here's a possible suggestion as to how the lintels got into place. That is one question most visitors ask: how were the lintels erected? Now, in 1950, the Society of Antiquaries of London asked a team of three archaeologists, Richard Atkinson, Stuart Piggott, and J.F.S. Stone, John Stone he was, to write a full and definitive volume on the archaeology of Stonehenge. And between 1950 and 1956, they excavated two of the Albury holes, which are part of a ring of 56 pits just inside the bank and ditch that surrounds Stonehenge, part of the avenue, which connects Stonehenge to the River Avon, and around the heelstone, which stands where the avenue meets the earthwork enclosure, part of the bank and ditch, and a portion of the bluestone circle. It's quite extensive. Here they are, smoking away in the trench. After the excavations, there was a lot of discussion about whether there should be restoration. and the proposed re-erecting of a complete trilithon that had fallen in 1797. Also, 2 other stones from the outer circle had fallen in 1900, as well as others in danger of collapse. There was some resistance at the time, but eventually the chief architect, who was called Aubrey Woodman Bailey, had his way, as he believed very much in reconstruction. What was then the Ministry of Works carried out a series of major restoration works at Stonehenge, and as was normal at the time, very hard cement mortar was used as one of the materials. Here they are inspecting the lintels. No hard hats, no high vis. Very different from today. So the major restoration work started in 1958 and included raising a lintel to complete the reconstruction of the trilithon here. We actually managed to find one of the people who had driven one of the cranes, a man called David Healy, and we were able to interview him for some oral history, which we have on the English Heritage website if anyone's interested. It was a huge crane that was used at an airfield very close by. But again, very scary pictures of everything that went on at that time. So, an inspection of Stonehenge, of the standing stones and the lintels, took place in 2019 by an historic England engineer called Arthur McCullum. And they had made regular checks of the stones, but it had been some time since a full engineering report had taken place. And this also coincided because we had a movable scaffold in place to allow some geological research work to take place at the same time. No structural works were identified as needed, but repairs to areas of the lintels that had been repaired and erected in 1958 were required, particularly on the trilithons. The lintels themselves didn't show much evidence of erosion despite their age, apart from the repairs recorded and from falls and the reconstruction. However, we did plan to do some repairs to the mortar itself, but we were slowed down because of the pandemic. So the results of the inspection identified areas where the mortar had cracked, and previous pinning of 2 of the lintels was also inspected. And here's some examples of what the mortar looked like that was suffering. So a project was drawn up to replace the cement mortar, check the pinning, and check the skyward-facing surfaces of the lintels. Because of the way the weather is changing and the nature of the stone, a lot of water does sit on the skyward-facing parts of the lintels. We applied for scheduled monument consent to do the work from Historic England on behalf of the government, and we employed a team from Sally Strachey Conservation, a very well-known and respected conservation firm in the UK, and the project was led by James Preston. So we drew up our methodology. I noticed someone else had a board comparing lots of different colours earlier on, which is quite interesting. We were going to clear out the loose and eroded mortar, and we would use hand tools only because we wanted it done with great care. We tried out different lime mortars to make sure the colour and texture match the stones, and a final one was eventually decided on. We used only lime mortar, which is a traditional breathable material, as you will know, unlike modern cements. And the lime allows water to escape rather than sitting in the cracks where it can freeze and expand, causing further erosion. But there was another factor where we had to protect the lichens, the air plants that are on the stones. So I'll just go on to that in a minute. So we drew up a plan of exactly what we were going to do, and as many of you might know, there's a numbering system at Stonehenge of the stones, which was actually initiated by Flinders Petrie, the famous Egyptologist, but he also took an interest in Stonehenge as well. The numbers start at the axis of the monument and continue in a clockwise direction. So we identified the ones that needed replacement mortar, and they include the ones on the list here, 1, 2, 21, lintels 1, 2, 2, 22, 29, 30, 51, 57, 58. I know that won't mean much to you unless you can read the plan, but still. There were quite a few that needed attention. And trials of small amounts of mortar were carried out on some of the exposed and skyward-facing lintels, and we're going to monitor those into the future. And one had a large crack at one end, for example, and the top of stone 5, which is exposed in lintel 107, had huge pockets. The sarsens are silkreed, which are marine sediments, so they naturally have a lot of solution holes in where sea plants would have left fissures and cracks and holes, which get filled with water very easily. At Stone 5 had an area fissured top of the trilithon, which we wanted to try and see if we could get it to shed water, so the mortar reflected that. And lintel 158 actually had been completely cracked, and we wanted to make sure that that was sound going into the future as well. So there were lots of other considerations as well as what we were doing. And the lichens, the air plants that grow on the stones was one of them, and they are legally protected in the UK. We took advice from a lichenologist on how to protect them. But we'd had a very recent survey done in 2017, and that showed that there hadn't been any major changes. Lots of you may know there is a major road that runs very close to Stonehenge, which has a lot of traffic, and we were slightly concerned about pollution. But in fact, they seem to survive quite well, and there were 2 new species actually as well, which the lichenologists were thrilled about, because they are very sensitive to the environment and they can show changes to the environment. But one of the things they did say was that the lime mortar should not touch the lichens if at all possible. So we did put into place procedures to protect the lichens. And then there's the geology itself. And in 2019, when that scaffold was up, there was a Professor David Nash of Brighton University, who is a world expert on silkreed, and he was very keen to do some work on the sarsens and try and pinpoint where they came from geologically. He was also, he was examining the sarsens at a chemical level, so they were doing XRF rather than, they didn't have to chip bits off anymore, which is wonderful. I can do it all with scanning techniques. But he was also able to point out that presence of flint nodules, for example, within the sarsens are very visible on the skyward-facing lintel tops. And he said that the flint is becoming exposed, even though it's a very, very slow process. There is erosion going on. He got very excited one day and said, "I can see geology in action," which is quite, quite slow in some ways, but she said, they will weather eventually. So because Stonehenge is open every day of the year except Christmas Day, and our visitors were coming as normal, we wanted to very much engage visitors with what was going on. So very often when we do conservation projects, we run what's called conservation in action. So we produce visual materials to tell the public what is going on. We were a little bit concerned about the scaffold and people trying to take pictures if they've come for a once-in-a-lifetime visit, but the majority of visitors were very interested and very supportive. And we have a fantastic bank of volunteers who were on site while the work was going on and were able to explain to the public all about the project. And I say most people found it very easy. And then there was just one final bit to the story, because the architect in 1958, his son, Richard Woodman Bailey, is very much in contact with us at Stonehenge. And when he was a boy, here he is on the left-hand side of the picture here, apparently he used to go with his father in the school holidays and be there very much while all the work was going on and everything. Here he is looking at some of the plans, and he had actually put a coin under one of the uprights in 1958. And so we got permission from Historic England to put another coin in. So he actually came and put a 2021 coin in under one of the lintels that was having some mortar work done, just to finish the story. So he was very pleased to be able to do that. So it's sort of, he'd been their man and boy, so to speak, literally. So please do come and visit Stonehenge, because we're fairly sure now that it's quite consolidated for years to come. But as you can see, our methods are very different. I did actually manage to get up to the top there, but of course with my high vis and my hard hat on, not like they did in 1958. So thank you very much.